Teach us, good Lord, to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and to not ask for any reward, except that of knowing that we do your will. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
German, it's another coup. Oh, really? Okay, Putin alert. Everybody.
He began at the top, calling the famous Victor Paz Estensaro, graduate of the American Institute, head of the MNR party, leader of the 1952 land revolution, and elected president in 1951, 1960, 1964, and would be elected again in 1985. He also called Hernan Silas Zuazo, also an American Institute graduate, who was the other main leader of the 52 revolution and two-time president of Bolivia. And he called Juan Lachin, a Lebanese Hispanic who was the head of the miners' union and head of the Bolivian workers' union. And the other was Marcelo Quiroga, a Hispanic writer, journalist, professor, and a leader of the Socialist Party. And last of all, Ivan Zagata, who was the head of the Socialist Party.
Dr. Paz Estensoro, the big chief. It's happening, and we have a meeting at 11 o'clock. Okay. Juan Lachin, it's okay. The Socialist Party, okay. All the big leaders. And the politicians, they say, immediately we need a meeting with the journalists, and we're gonna say that since today, a civil strike. No work, no nothing, until these crazy militaries, they go out. All the big trade union leaders.
And you're the one that called me.
And the Catholic Church.
Where was the meeting?
In El Prado, there was a building of the miners. It's not anymore because the crazy militaries, they
destroyed it. And they began to gather at 11 a.m. Very few persons came. One of those who came was Marcelo Ortega, a Methodist lawyer who also represented the IMB at the meeting. But only three of the big leaders arrived. Juan Lachin of the Miners' Union, Marcelo Quiroga, and Ivan Zagata of the Socialist Party. Those present told Herman to call again. They especially needed Victor Paz Estensaro because he was so famous he would provide some protection for all of them from the paramilitary. No one would dare kill him. So Herman called Estensaro and the other missing leaders.
The main person was Victor Paz Estensaro because the biggest political chief. I'm coming. Wait, I'm coming. Well, he says that he's coming, so we need to wait. Hernan Silesuazo, the other one. Yes, I'm coming. I'm coming. And they never arrived.
Juan Lachin speaks up.
Well, maybe it's not a coup. Let me phone to the trade union in Beni, where it's supposed to begin the military coup. Hello? Tell me, do you see some soldiers? What is happening in Beni? And from the other one, no, nothing. It's completely okay. Well, maybe it's a fake news because everybody's saying that it's okay. So let's wait. We waited. We were like this, sitting, and the windows were to the Prado, to the... Suddenly, shocked. Everybody was shocked. I saw them, they paralyzed. because I said, please, like they paralyzed with in the first 5 minutes when it began. Marcelo Quiroga, the one who was killed, says, okay, who has guns here? Not me, not me, not me, not me, not me, not nobody. And he said, well, I'm the only one that I have. And he take his, because we don't have any, we can't defend. If when they're gonna up, you're gonna be prisoners. They took the first floor. They took the second floor. We were in the third floor. Lechin says, okay, don't worry. I know how can we to the other street.
We can sneak away.
A secret way to run. And it was a very small
Passageway. Yeah.
So, but the paramilitaries, they were
Waiting at the bottom. They shot up the stairway
yes,
right by you,
in our here.
right next to you. Just missed you.
The whole because we were
Yeah.
no, back again. And 2 miners, they were killed in that moment. So everybody wanted to run, and some of us, it was any place to hide to us. Everybody went to the bathroom, they closed the door.
Thought that would stop the military by closing the door.
And okay, we need to say that we gave up. Okay, you? No, not me. I can. You? No. You? Herman,
Who's going to tell him?
you must say that. Hey, we give up. We don't have any gun. We have anything. Don't shoot. Okay, then you go down to us. And the others only looking. So I closed my eye because I thought that they will shoot me there. You know what saved me? Hey, I'm the bishop of the church.
And then they realized you weren't the bishop of the Catholic Church.
And they killed there Marcelo.
Marcelo Quiroga was a Hispanic who came from a very, very rich, famous family in Cochabamba. Herman says he was a very good man, a very rich guy. His family owned half of Cochabamba and were like the Kennedys in Massachusetts. Marcelo was an intellectual, a journalist, a writer, a professor, and leader of the Socialist Party. Very famous. And they shot him right in the head, right in front of the other prisoners. The soldiers took the prisoners down to the Prado. All the stores had, of course, been closed, and those with glass storefronts had rolled down their steel covering to protect their store. A few of the stores had a hole cut through the steel covering so that people could still squeeze through and still get into the business. Once down on the Prado, the soldiers ordered the prisoners to back up and put their backs to the wall of the closed businesses. Mario Ortega, the Methodist, with his hands up, happened to be backing up toward the small cutout door to a bank.
Mario, when was passing there,
He just backed all the way through the door into the bank.
and the other, well, they didn't know if they run after Mario or keep us. So Mario.
That got away. Oh my gosh.
They took the other prisoners to a jail on the Plaza Moreno. The building is no longer there. The government in 2006 took this building, which represented torture and tumultuous and violent politics of the past, and tore the prison down and replaced it with the new House of Parliament. Herman loves the poetic justice that the place where he was almost killed is now where the democratic parliament meets. For the Bolivian coup, The biggest threat was the U.S. government. The U.S., with its military and covert operations, could quickly destroy any coup, and the U.S. did not take kindly to those who overthrew elected governments. However, the U.S. was immersed in the Great Cold War. The U.S. government divided the world into two groups, communists and those against communism. The best way, in American eyes, to justify any coup d'etat was to claim that it was to prevent a communist takeover of the nation. Consequently, the Meza dictatorship immediately began to look for some way to prove that there was a communist plot and to show it to U.S. officials. There were several dozen prisoners already sitting in the jail, scared and wondering what would happen to them, when Herman and the others he was with were thrown into the cell. Meza had hired the Argentine Secret Service to conduct the tortures of his political prisoners. Each of them had a nickname. One was called the Killer. Following is an exchange of a discussion I had with Herman in which he tells the next part of his story. The events he's describing are terrible and horrible, and yet he tells the story in a funny way, laughing throughout. I guess it is a defense mechanism within him that allows him to remember the story but not be forever crushed by it. Neither he nor I intend to belittle or make fun of those who suffered and were tortured, including Dr. Crespo himself. By the way, when Herman says boom, he means that a torture hit the person who was speaking. As they were sitting there in the prison, Herman saw Ivan Zagata, a leader of the Socialist Party, one of the leading members of the Permanent Assembly of Human Rights in Bolivia. The killer walked into the jail and called out Zagata's name. They then dragged him off. Within a few minutes, all the prisoners could hear Zagata's screams. Here is Dr. Crespo's description of what happened.
12 in the middle of the night. We just, and then they take back to the jail. Oh, I say, look, of course, don't worry. This will happen only to the politicians, not to us. Don't worry, because we are not politicians.
Herman was convinced that only the politicians would be tortured.
I was trying to calm them because they were, everybody was. The second name, Herman. The one that was saying, don't worry. I said, me? Why? Boom. And they put me up. And there was with a man's blood was so.
They took Herman into the same room that Zagata had been in. Zagata's blood was all over the interrogation floor. They emptied his pockets and placed his stuff on the table, including the calculator.
What is your name? Herman Crespo. Boom, boom. In the first question, that very easy question, I was.
They're already hitting you and beating on you.
Somehow I was happy. Say, oh, maybe they are looking another one because why?
They asked my name. They don't even know who I am.
If I am.
Yeah. Herman thought that since they didn't know his name, that they were looking for somebody else and they would let him out of jail.
Once again, what is your name? Herman Crespo. Boom, boom, boom. I said, but they are saying who I am. I'm saying who I am. And they're almost killing me. For the last time.
He cocked his gun and put the barrel against your head?
What is your name? If I say Herman Crespo again,
They're going to shoot you.
what will I say? What is your name for the last time? And they'll say your complete name. Herman Alejandro Crespo. Now are you remembering? Now you remember. What is your name?
The captors demanded that he sign a confession that the IEMB was a communist organization. Herman pleaded with his captors.
Okay, where the guns are. The second question, crazy question. ¿Dónde están las armas? No, we belong to the church. We don't have any arms, no. Maybe the Bible? Boom! So you're kidding us, eh?
But Herman realized that his captors didn't care what the truth was. They needed a confession that had already been written out, and all that was needed was Herman's signature. A confession that the Methodist Church of Bolivia was a communist organization. The truth didn't matter. They needed that confession, and if it took torture to get it, they would get it. Herman was severely beaten throughout his body. Sign this confession. We know the Methodist Church is a communist organization. Sign the confession. And with each refusal by Herman came a new punch, a new kick, a new pain. At one point, his torturers left the room, leaving one lone torturer alone with him to guard him. Herman looked up and recognized the man. He was a classmate of Herman's from his days at the University of La Paz. "Why are you doing this to me? You know me. Why?" "Herman, I'm so sorry. I joined the army because it was the only job I could find. And at least with me, maybe I can save your life." The beatings and tortures continued for seemingly endless hours. Finally, at one point, Herman found himself lying on the dirty floor of the jail cell, bleeding from his mouth. He couldn't breathe. He knew he had broken ribs. Herman told me, "David, the pain was so intense, I would have signed anything." So I told my captors, "Okay, I'll sign the confession." At that exact moment, one of his captors slammed his hand down on the table. Everything that was on the table bounced up in the air, and something landed on the on button for his calculator. His captors heard, but Herman heard, reminding him of the closing refrain, "Let goods and kindred go, this mortal life also. The body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. His kingdom lasts forever." Herman didn't sign. Herman later told me, quote, "I understood that the Lord was sending me a sign of encouragement, and I told him to kill me, but I will not sign." At that moment, I was taken back to the jail cell where everyone was horrified by my condition and also surprised by how happy I was as I continued to listen to the hymn of my loyalty to him. Unquote. At the same time that Juan Lachin was being murdered and Dr. Herman Crespo and the rest of the Committee for the Permanent Democracy was being arrested and taken to torture chambers, Mario Ortega was escaping through an open door at the bank. At the same time, less than a mile away, leaders of the IMB began to drift into the IMB offices in La Paz to begin work for the day. Eugenio Poma, director of a school in Ancarimas, was in La Paz to do some business and had popped into the IMB offices early that morning. But then they heard the staff ran to the windows and were looking out onto the street. There were men, armed men, running around the streets dressed in black shirts. All Bolivians knew those black shirts meant that they were soldiers dressed as civilians, and the weapons meant they were staging a coup. Eugenio quickly left the offices because he figured that the paramilitary would be invading the offices looking to arrest the Methodist leaders. He was completely lost and unsure of what to do. He pulled his ucha down low over his face and he walked the streets, afraid to go anywhere familiar where the army might find him. Thankfully, the Methodists were looking for him too. Mario Ortega, the man who had deftly backed his way out of the army custody through the bank's doors, contacted some of the remaining Methodist leaders and told them what had happened and who had been arrested. The Methodists immediately began to warn all the remaining leaders and to help them get out of La Paz. Shortly after Eugenio left the offices, the paramilitary sure enough showed up at the offices of the IMB, armed to the teeth, with a list of persons they were planning on arresting. And Eugenio was at the top of the list. He'd be arrested and probably tortured, as was happening to Herman at that moment, just a few blocks away, but no one in the office knew where Eugenio was. Eugenio felt that the safest place for him to go was back to Ancarimas, where he was a respected leader and where people would help protect him. Knowing that there would be military checkpoints and roadblocks looking for him and others, Eugenio decided to walk up the steep ravine and out of La Paz. He began his journey back to Ancarimas by walking the side streets and the footpaths up from La Paz to El Alto. Once he got to El Alto, he still felt that the safest way back was to walk. So Eugenio began a 2-day walk to Ancarimas. At almost every little town that he came on, local indigenous leaders had established roadblocks of their own. The intent of these roadblocks was to shut down commerce in Bolivia and to starve out La Paz until the military stepped down. The community leaders had left orders to not let anyone pass through the barriers, friend or foe. When Eugenio reached the first barricade, they asked what he was doing and who he was. He said, "I'm a Methodist, and I need to return to my home." The man at the barrier looked surprised and waved him through. Apparently, he knew who the Methodists were and what they stood for. As he got closer and closer to Ancarimas, he began to see familiar faces manning the barricades. Some of them were Methodists. Eugenio would say to them, "You should go home. The military is coming and they will arrest or kill you or kill anyone trying to block their convoy." But no one took his advice. They stood guard, women with babies on their backs, children and young persons with sticks in their hands, men with pitchforks and other handmade weapons. They were all determined to stop any truck from passing through their town, even if it was a military vehicle. As Eugenio got closer to Ancarimas, he knew some of the people, and he told them, "It will be a massacre. Saving people's lives is more important than stopping the trucks. You must return to your homes and be safe." And then he heard a voice from the crowd say in Aymara, "Coward, you told us to stand strong for democracy." Unquote. And then Eugenio remembered his own speeches that he had shared with the communities about being strong to hold on to democracy. The testing time was once again upon Eugenio. As Eugenio continued walking, contemplating this, it was getting dark. There was a chill wind sweeping down the Altiplano, and Eugenio had grown very weary. So he found a place next to a wall where he was out of the wind and laid down for a few hours of sleep. Day 1, July 17th, 2 p.m., Supecho, Bolivia, approximately 200 miles east of La Paz, down the world's most dangerous road. Meanwhile, at almost the exact same time as Herman is being hauled off to jail, and Eugenio is beginning his walk out of the La Paz ravine, approximately 200 miles east of La Paz, at the bottom of the famous world's most dangerous road, in the jungles of the Alta Beni, there is the small town of Supecho. It only had about 20 homes at the time, but it's much bigger today. While all that pain and fear was going on in the capital city on July 17th, it started out as a pretty normal day in Supecho. Benjamin Peredes, now a local pastor for Supecho Church, was serving his little bamboo church and improving the community. Sarah Corson, her 16-year-old daughter Kathy, and 15-year-old son Tom were hosting a U.S. volunteer construction team of 17 people for CFAT in Supecho. They were housed in the Corson's old home near the fish ponds, and the team had arrived in June and had already been there for about 3 weeks of a planned month-long work project. But around 10 a.m., some local women rushed back the 10 miles into town from the little bamboo stilt market and were completely shaken and afraid. They had been at the nearby market at the river and saw soldiers everywhere. The women overheard the soldiers say they were going to find and kill every North American they could find, and they were looking to arrest all of the Bolivian Methodists. Now, Supecho is far, far from the political center of Bolivia in a relatively non-strategic location. Neither Ken, Sarah, nor Benjamin had been very political the previous couple of years. There had been over 20 coups in Bolivia over the last couple of decades, and no one in Supecho had ever been involved or attacked or arrested. Consequently, Sarah, Benjamin, and all the others in Supecho were worried for their country and for their church and its leaders. Not too worried about their own safety. There was no reason for them to be arrested. Maybe the insurrectionists would be looking for some of the Methodists in La Paz who had been active politically since the 1979 coup. But the soldiers wouldn't be targeting them since they were never involved in that counter-coup. Besides, false rumors like this tend to be exaggerated as is passed from one person to the next. However, Benjamin called for a special worship service in Supecho for the next evening, to pray for peace and a return to democracy. He invited Sarah and the team to join them the next night at the service. But then around 4 or 5 in the afternoon of the 17th, a small plane flew over Supecho and circled the town twice. But the third time it circled around, the plane came in low and fired a volley of shots into the bamboo houses of the town. It didn't hit anybody, but it did some damage to some of the homes and spread fear, which was probably their main intent. However, what it actually did was galvanize the community. The whole town was suddenly in opposition to the military because the soldiers were so focused on killing anyone who disagreed with them. Many townspeople, and especially some of the young people of the Methodist Church, began to cut down trees and have them fall over the dirt road that led to Supecho. This was intended to slow down and frustrate the military as they drove their vehicles toward Supecho. They worked deep into the night, felling tree after tree to slow the military vehicles' advance. Finally, everyone went to bed, but the fear was intense. As the people of Supecho settled down for the night, and Eugenio slept alongside the road at Ancarimas, Herman and the other prisoners were still going through hell. Day 2, pre-dawn, July 18th, 1980. It's now the pre-dawn hours of July 18th. Back in the prison, some prisoners in Herman's jail cell overheard the voices of some guards, including the one that was called the killer. Who will it be today? And the killer would tell them the name of one of the prisoners. A few hours later, they came and they dragged that prisoner out of the cell. The other prisoners could hear the screams of the person being tortured, and then the prisoner would never return to the jail cell. All of those in the cell knew that he must have been executed. This occurred every day over the next few days. Although it was becoming light on the morning of July 18th, Herman and the other political prisoners had been placed in a completely darkened cell with no light at all. There were many prisoners in the room, Methodists, Union leaders, a few Roman Catholic priests, and many others who were deemed dangerous to the new dictator. However, they were afraid to talk as they didn't know all of these fellow prisoners, and they knew that the military had placed some spies in among them. Later that morning, the cell door opened, and two more were shoved into the cell where Herman and the others were. Herman is speaking.
Then another two Catholic nuns from Ancorames more, it was a mine. And they took them and they put in the same jail to us, two nuns. But why you two nuns? What you did?
We received Bibles from the bishop, Latin American Bible.
The Catholic Church, they did a new one that the name is Latin American Bible. Because it was a reform movement in the Catholic Church.
You could do it.
The whole was in the way that we talk.
They said that this Bible was printed by the communists.
That's all they did. They got a Bible that was translated into Spanish, but the military was convinced it was a communist version of the Bible.
Yes, because how can you have a Latin American Bible? The Bible is only one. Latin.
Can I pray?
What kind of Bible you will pray?
Oh my gosh.
So they even hit her and beat on the nun.
Herman later told me that when the guards left, the other prisoners heard the story and they were shocked that these nuns were being punished for reading a modern translation of the Bible in Spanish. And then the nun pulled out a copy of the Bible that she had hidden in her nun's habit or her clothes. We were shocked that she had it and filled with joy. With great enthusiasm, caution, and fear, we passed the Bible from hand to hand. It was as if it were a forbidden book and we'd never seen it before. We quickly looked up the 23rd Psalm and read it quietly so as not to be discovered. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, and when I see them, I will go without fear. The table thou hast prepared for me before my adversaries. With oils thou perfumest my head and replenishes my cup. And suddenly the killer opened the door, surprising us in the middle of reading the Bible. We were paralyzed. We did not know what to do. The killer ripped the Bible out of the nun's hand and gave her a terrible blow to the face that knocked her to the floor. He then said, "The next time it will be worse for all of you. As punishment, you will all stand still facing the wall, and whoever moves will be flogged. Do you understand?" Standing in front of the wall without any movement became the routine of the punishment and the reason for tortures. Suddenly, the killer, and one called Mr. Atlas, another one called La Dolores,
would enter the cell to surprise us as if we were out of formation, and we would be punished with the goal to break our faith.
That day and every day over the next couple of weeks, each prisoner had a session. Dr. Crespo has been very reluctant to describe these sessions to me. However, they were times of interrogation and torture by the Argentine secret police who had been hired by the dictator. The tortures continued every day. The questions to Haman were always the same. Is the Methodist Church a communist organization? Will you sign this confession? With each refusal came more pain, more creative ways to give pain. The prisoners were always on edge, wondering if their turn in the torture chamber was next. This routine would occur day after day after day for the next 10 to 12 days. It was intended to break the spirit of the prisoners. Day 2, Friday, July 18th, sunrise. As the sun began to peak over the Andes on July 18th and down upon the Altiplano, its warming rays woke Eugenio Poma, who had been sleeping outside near the road. He woke up, ate some fruit, and continued his long walk back to Ancaraimas. Moving back to Supecho, that evening around 6 p.m., the Supecho Methodist Church held a special Friday night worship service. The church had a dirt floor. It had bamboo walls that you could easily see through the cracks. There were 8-inch wide long boards that sat on piles of dirt that served as pews. The men sat on these, quote, pews, unquote, and the women brought blankets to sit on the floor. They wanted their church to look like an urban church, so they piled up the dirt to have a raised chancel area with bamboo altar and a bamboo pulpit. Benjo preached. Sarah Corson, her children, and the U.S. CFAT team were all there. Sarah vividly remembers the sermon. Here's Sarah quoting Benjo's sermon.
He talked to them and he said, "We are in a very dangerous time, and you young people are going out and cutting trees against an army that your trees can't do anything for, but they can kill you and every one of us in this village." And he said, "Your trees are not going to help. I am against them too, but we can't be against them in violence." His sermon was, "God is more powerful than an atomic bomb." I'll never forget that was the subject of his sermon.
Wow.
And he said, "You've got to use spiritual weapons to overcome this, and I'm pleading with you all. Let us pray as one voice to God that he will deliver us from these horrible dictators that are coming in." So when he walked out, the service was over, and I was outside already because he had talked to somebody up there at the front, and the rest of us had gone out, and we walked out, and there were 3 soldiers with rifles. And then Benjo walks out. I was shocked, but, I said hello to them, and they were very polite to me. "Hello, Senora. We want to go to that preacher that was up there." What they wanted was the leaders.
Yeah.
And they took the president of the MYF, who was the song leader. They had seen him. They had peeked in through the cracks of the bamboo while we were having service and seen who spoke and who were the leaders. And so they took that young man, and when Benjo came out, they said to him, "We want you to go with us because we need to ask you some questions. You know the area, and so you'll be able to give us information. So we only just want to interview you, and we'll bring you back tomorrow with a lie."
Oh, really?
They were taking him, and he knew it was a lie.
Yeah.
He knew they were saying that for my sake and for everybody around there, so that we wouldn't know that they were
Yeah.
making him a prisoner. And And so Benjo knew it, but he couldn't do anything about it because they had the guns. There's no reason. And he had his Bible in his hand when he came out. And they took him prisoner with his Bible. He had it in his hand.
So everyone went home scared, but hoping they could bring Benjo and the youth director back home in the morning, but fearing the worst. So Sarah's 17-member U.S. team began to settle down for the night in the Corson's old home in Sapetio, out among the tilapia ponds. It was a hot night in the jungle, so they slept with the windows open. And Tom, Sarah's teenage son, decided he would sleep on the screened-in porch at the back of the house. It was a restless night of sleep. But for Sarah, she couldn't sleep at all.
And that night, it was about midnight when I hadn't gone to bed yet, but my kids had, my team had, and even Tommy had. He was out on the front porch, and I went out to cover him because it got cold. He couldn't sleep. 17 people, one room in the house for him. Tommy slept on the porch. And it got unusually chilly, and I went out to put a blanket on him so he wouldn't wake up cold the next morning. And that's when I heard something ran into our water barrel, a 55-gallon drum. We collected the water from the roof. And I looked, and I could see because it was if it wasn't a full moon, it was almost full. So it was like light outside, like a full moon. And I looked through the screen. We had the front porch was screened in. And I looked through and I saw about 30 soldiers rushing the house with guns, and they'd come and stop, and then 2 would rush in right to that water barrel and divide and go around the house. And they would just be 10 feet from me, but they didn't see me because the porch was dark. There was no moonlight inside it, but I could see them. And, I just froze. I was so scared. But then I'll always be thankful for that because I will never in my life have a doubt that God exists if I ever had one, because I was so scared. I thought, you don't have to come in here. I'll just die right here looking at you. I thought I was dying. I couldn't breathe. My blood was banging in my temples, in my head and my heart. And then I just said, God, please take care of the kids in here and take care of my kids at home. And I mean, the team and my kids, because I thought I was dying. I knew they were going to shoot me. And that moment, I suddenly had the greatest peace. I knew it was okay. God was orchestrating whatever was going to happen. Blood quit throbbing in my temples, my heart. It just go right back down in my heart, beating its regular place. I have never had such an experience as that before nor since. But that could never have happened unless there was a divine presence there. I felt him so strongly. We usually have to faith a lot of things, but I felt him that minute. God was just wrapping me up. And I didn't think he was going to protect me. I never even thought to ask him to save my life because I didn't think even God would stop 30 rifles, jam 30 rifles in the middle of the jungle. But, I began to move and act and talk, and I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew after I'd said it. I was conscious, but I wasn't calling the shots. It was like I was a puppet, and God was moving my tongue. He was moving my hands, my feet. He was moving you know, a puppet, how you pull strings and move them around?
Yes.
I felt like a puppet in the hands of God. And that was an awesome feeling. And that minute, all I had time for was that one prayer. God, save this team and save my own children. What happens to them, the ones that left at home, and all my family. And then I said, God, please, I've lived for you since I was 13. I made my formal commitment to Christ. And before then, too, I was trying to live for him. And I said, and I'm so ashamed of myself that now I'm afraid when I have to die for you. And I said, please, God, take this fear away. Don't let them shoot. You take the fear away. I want to die trusting you. And the minute I said that, I wasn't afraid.
Wow.
That fear away.
Wow.
It was beyond anything I can describe to you. It was an assurance that was as much as I know that I'm talking to you right now. As much as I know I've got a hand on my body. And I just turned and walked out of the door. And I didn't know what I was going to do, what I was doing, but I was moving. And there was this soldier squatting down by the door with his gun up toward our window. And we didn't have glass in it, but we had screen wire instead of glass to keep the mosquitoes.
Right.
And this guy was squatting down with his gun up, and he was just a kid that was in there so he could get fed.
Yeah.
He was a hungry kid. He wasn't there for any. And so without thinking, I just went up behind him and put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, brother, hermano, you know, and he screamed and dropped the bullet he was putting in the gun. And that let him know that they were discovered, his scream. And he said, help me, it ain't me, it's him. And pointed to the lieutenant that was on the other side of the yard. And I can't remember what he looked like except his legs. I remember his long legs just taking huge strides coming straight at me from across, because there I stood out in the moonlight with him. And I called out to him, and I did not plan to say this. I didn't plan anything. My brain was frozen, but I was at peace, and God just used my tongue. And I said, welcome, brothers. I called it out loud to all of them, and I used the word hermanos. I said, welcome. And I said, come in and tell us what you want. Everybody's welcome at our house, soldiers too. I said, you don't need your guns to talk to us. Just come tell us what you want. And he came up and grabbed me by the shoulder and swung me around and headed me back toward the back door, because I'd come out the front door. And that's where a candle was burning in the kitchen, because no other lights, no electricity. Right. And I'd left the candle on when I went out to put the blanket on Tom. And so he put the gun in my back and gave me a push and said, get in there, get in that door back there. And so I walked to it and walked inside the porch and into the kitchen. And by then the others had gone inside and had got everybody up out of the beds, and they were all there in their pajamas. And around that candle we had a table with benches on the side where all 17 of them could sit to eat. And they were all sitting there just quiet and peaceful. I don't know what they were feeling, but there wasn't anybody looking scared or anything. I'm sure they were, but they were just sitting there. And they were pulling stuff out from under our bed. And I remember one stuck the gun in the only bookcase we had and knocked all the books out, looking for the guns we didn't have. Now, David, if we'd had guns,
yeah,
we'd be dead today.
Yep. Yep.
We didn't have guns. We had something more powerful than guns, like Benjo had just told us. And that's right, he had the service right before then, said God is more powerful than an atomic bomb. And so I turned around to face him with the kids over there on my left, and that little light of a candle, and he rammed the gun in my stomach. And he said, I'm here to tell you, I don't let people live that try to stop my revolution. And I said, brother, we've done nothing to stop your revolution, which was a true fact. Because now I'm sure Dr. Crespo had, you know, but I had not, so I could say, I have done nothing to stop your revolution. We are here for two reasons, to help the hungry and to preach the Bible to them. And he said, that doesn't tell me anything. I've never read the Bible in my life. And he said, the Bible's probably a communist for all I know. And I just felt so sorry for him. I thought, oh, God, I'd rather be here in my place and get shot than to be in his place and have to shoot to save his own life. Because I said, well, if you haven't heard, let me tell you what the Bible says. And I picked up the Bible. There was one lying there, and turned to Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. And I said, we follow Jesus, the Son of God. And he taught us a better way than the way of fighting. He taught us the way of love. And I said, and because of that, I can honestly say to you, I know you're my enemy. I know you've come to kill me. I've already been told to watch out that you all were coming for all Methodists and all Americans. And I'm both. And I know you're going to kill me. But I want to tell you, I will die loving you because God loves you. And I have to love you too because I follow him. Now, I wasn't brave, David. Don't think for one minute I was brave. It was that I wasn't moving in my power. My brain was frozen. Really frozen.
Wow.
I was just nowhere. And God just took over, and I just felt him moving the strings of this little puppet that I was. And he said, I don't believe that. I don't believe one word of it. Nobody loves their enemies. And I said, do you want to prove it? You've got the gun. You can prove it. You can kill me quick or you can kill me slow. I said, there's a machete over there. We had one lying there that we'd used in the garden. And I said, take that machete. And I demonstrated with my arm. I held out my arm with the other one pointed. I said, chop me to pieces, little by little, and let me die slow. You can kill me fast or you can kill me slow. And if you kill me slow, I will prove to you that I will die praying for you because God loves you. And I'm his witness here to tell you I love you too. And he said, and he slowly took the gun out of my stomach and put it down toward the side. And he said, I don't want to kill you, but I have to. Because Klaus Barbie, he's the one that told me.
As it turned out, the soldiers in the market were not Bolivian army soldiers, but they were members of a private army that worked for Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie was a Nazi Gestapo functionary during World War II. He was known as the Butcher of Lyon for having personally tortured and murdered 14,000 Jews and members of the French resistance in Lyon, France, during the war. After the war, U.S. intelligence services employed him for his anti-Marxist efforts and aided his escape to Bolivia. He also got to Bolivia with some extreme wealth, probably stolen from the Jews whom he murdered in Lyon. Barbie had a hand in both the Banzer coup and dictatorship in the 1970s and in Garcia Meza's coup and dictatorship in 1980. When the dictatorship fell in 1981, Armand Zuazo returned as the democratically elected president. The Bolivian army immediately arrested Barbie and extradited him to France, where he was convicted of crimes against humanity, and he died in prison in 1991. Again, he was one of the worst Nazi Gestapo leaders, a man who killed Jews for recreation.
He said, "Klaus Barbie is my boss. He's the one in control of our army. And he won't even let us look the other way, or he'll shoot us dead. He's got plenty more to take my place." He said, "I have to kill you. If I don't, he will, because the orders were to kill everybody in the house with a radio antenna." Well, it was a radio antenna with a crystal in it that would only let us speak to the Methodist network. We tell them somebody was sick, bring medicine, or put it on the bus that's coming down, or something like that. Every night we had to do. But they thought we were using that antenna to direct troops, and that's why they came to our house. I have to kill you, or I will be killed. And I wasn't lying. I really felt this God gave me a love for that man that was going to kill me. I couldn't have loved him, but if we make an intent to, God will help us. And I said to him, "Brother, go ahead and kill me, because I don't want you to get killed, because I know Jesus, and I'm ready to die, but you're not. I want you to live long enough so you have a chance to know him too." And he said, "I can't do it. I can't do it. If they kill me, I can't kill you. And I don't know why I can't." And then he got mad. He said, "I don't know why I can. I've been able to kill many people. Never bothered me. They were just my duty to exterminate them. But I've never known them face to face." He said, "I just know there's a power in this room, something that I can't fight. I could always fight anything before, and I always won. But there's something in this house I cannot fight." And he said, "I know what I'll do. I'll take you prisoner and let them kill you. And that way maybe I won't get killed either." And that's when he took us prisoner,
Wow. Wow.
"And I didn't take you prisoner or kill you. I'll pay for it with my life." But he risked his life to save ours. And so God doesn't need to stop 30 guns. He can stop it another way, And so then he said, "I'll take the men, but I won't take you."
I won't take the women and children, yeah.
And then he said these very words, as I remembered. I know he said this thought. He said, "I can't take you all prisoner, because I'm about to take you into a jungle camp of over 1,000 soldiers. And I know how they treat women prisoners, and you all would not live through it."
So Klaus Barbie's soldiers tied the hands of the 5 U.S. men on the CFAT team, and they took the 15-year-old Tom Corson and another teenager on the U.S. team and headed out the door. Sarah followed them. When they got to a little gathering area, she saw several men sitting on the ground with their hands tied behind their back. There was the Methodist district superintendent from Caranavi, Benjo, the music leader and the youth leader of their church, and several other men, Methodist and non-Methodist, of the village, as well as Tom and the 15-year-old Peter, who'd been born in Puerto Rico and was a part of the U.S. team, and the only one besides Tom who was fluent in Spanish, and the others who had been arrested in her home. She also saw Adrian the communist. He obviously had been fighting the soldiers. He was pretty beaten up and bleeding from his head. You'll remember Adrian from season 5, episode 1, in which, when the team arrived in Cepecho, Sarah decided that she would go and speak to this new European nonprofit development agency person named Adrian had moved to town, but he was also a known communist. And the team didn't want her to go and visit with them because they might become associated with the communists in the government's mind. But she went anyway, and they had a very pleasant conversation talking about the needs of the community and how they both were working to improve the community. They had different methodologies, and they parted on very amicable basis. And they had arrested Benjo's young son Isaac, whom I believe was about 6 years old. All the men were sitting on the ground with their arms tied behind their back. And then they loaded them all into military vehicles. Sarah watched in horror and despair as the military trucks drove away from Cepecho towards the jungle bamboo internment camp.
And that's where he took my son, to that camp, and Tom was in that camp. It was on Tomanoco's agricultural farm, and in their big complex they had down there in the middle of the jungle, because they were partners with them.
Tomanico was a huge agribusiness who set up programs in which they gave free rice seed to farmers around Cepecho. However, the peasants had to sign that they would sell the rice to Tomanico, who paid below market value for the rice, with the farmers slowly becoming more and more in debt to Tomanico while the company made huge profits. The owners of Tomanico owned some of the largest mines in Bolivia and were, of course, Criollo elite, very supportive of any right-wing dictator who would continue to keep the indigenous oppressed and without democratic rights. It was on the land of that fine, upstanding company, and I'm being sarcastic if you can't hear it, it was that fine company where they built the temporary prison and sent Benjo, Tom, Adrian, and the other U.S. and Bolivian men. As the trucks with the prisoners was bouncing down the road, Benjo and the other men began to badger the soldiers and question their manhood. What kind of an army arrests children? Are you afraid of their toys? You are weaklings, etc. As they drove past Benjo's house, he managed to talk them into stopping and letting out his son Isaac get out of the truck, and the truck sped on to the bamboo jail. Virtually none of the women on the U.S. team nor the women in the village could sleep. They frantically prayed for the safety of their men. We will continue the docudrama of July 17, 1980, with Part B, Day 3, which are available now on both YouTube and on the internet at www.weavingtheblanket.com.
Mineros somos, oh Señor, ayúdanos a encaminar. Injusticias habrá, Señor, dolor y amargura. Todos los mineros, Señor, buscaremos la justicia. Explotados y maltratados, ayúdanos, Señor. Apiádate, oh mi Señor, del pueblo minero. Humildemente te pedimos salvación, liberación.